There is a growing buzz around XTZ Sound. The Sweden-based hi-fi company describes itself as a border-crossing network of engineers, technicians, manufacturers, and producers that manufacture speakers in Sweden and Asia and then sells them direct around the world. The latest products from XTZ are their Cinema Series M6 and S5 speakers. The $1,000 M6 and $700 S5 were designed for high output, low distortion, and accurate response. They feature a unique driver configuration in a compact yet solid cabinet design with superb attention to detail and a very attractive price. I was sent 3 M6 speakers for mains and centers and 2 S5s for surrounds. Upon opening the box, other than the individually clothed bag speaker and magnetic grille, one will find the neatly packed manual, magnetic logo badge, and rubber feet, along with a pair of white gloves to separate your greasy mitts from your new speakers. The gloves work very well for debutante balls. Unfortunately, my corn-fed Iowa hands were just a little too big for those gloves, so my apologies to XTZ, but you're going to be getting some fingerprints back with your speakers. Fortunately, the flawless matte black finish does an admirable job of rejecting fingerprints as well as light and dust. Sure, a piano black wet look finish is always a head turner, but this is a cinema system, and the XTZ speakers still look good while being functional and not directly reflecting light from your display back to your eyes. The magnetic grills are very sturdy, constructed on a nicely finished wood frame with no rough edges or plastic. As mentioned, the logos are also magnetic, so you can actually mount them on the top, bottom, or side of the grill in any orientation or leave them off completely. Looking at the main/center M6, you'll see the cabinets are asymmetrical with only 2 parallel sides. This not only combats standing waves within the cabinet, but it allows you to flush mount the speaker on a wall vertically using XTZ's optional wall mount and still have a slight amount of toe-in with the angled front baffle. Of course, you can also use the available matching stands. The M6 also serves as the system's center channel and, oriented accordingly, can have the front baffle and drivers angled up or down towards the listener. These speakers are seal designs, meaning they don't have any ports that need to be kept away from walls, and the bottom of their frequency response will drop off more gradually than something in a ported design. In this case, the low end reaches about 75 Hz plus or minus 3 decibels, making the M6 perfect to cross over to a capable subwoofer. The cabinets themselves are manufactured with high density fiberboard, which is stronger and harder than MDF or medium density fiberboard. Knock knock. Who's there? Nobody. Seriously, these are very non-resonant cabinets. Where some speaker cabinets sound like you're knocking on a thin-walled hollow box, these sound like a solid piece of wood. A solid box means the resonance of the enclosure won't be coloring your speaker response. And at almost 20 pounds each in a 17 by 9 inch square, the M6 are remarkably stout despite being relatively compact. In fact, it'll be difficult to show on camera, but if you look around a well-designed crossover, you'll see the cabinet is stuffed with foam and fiber fill. They were taking no chances at XTZ when they decided to make sure that there weren't any internal resonances on these cabinets. There are many speaker designs that feature a single tweeter flanked by 2 woofers, often called a Diapolito array. But the M6 have not 1, but 4 1-inch tweeters. I asked Dan Romer at Intersource OEM, which also does business as Clarity Audio, who designed the XTZ Cinema Series speakers, what's up with the 4 tweeters? Dan detailed a number of potential problems that using multiple tweeters works towards solving. For instance, if you use multiple tweeters, that shares the thermal load, the heat generated, and allows for a lower crossover point to the woofer. This reduces distortion and beaming of mid-frequencies. The crossover frequency is lowered in the XTZs down to 1.2 kHz, which, Dan notes, is right around the area below which our brain uses phase to determine directionality, and above which we use amplitude. Where a woofer at 2 to 3 kHz might be very directional, a tweeter can be more omnidirectional, allowing for a more even dispersion in this very critical band. One of the problems in using multiple tweeters in close proximity to one another is that they can cause interference with each other, and that's the main reason people wrinkle their noses at this approach. However, Dan has a way around that. He doesn't run all 4 tweeters all the way up to 20 kHz. Instead, 3 of the tweeters are rolled off at just 3 kHz, and then 1 tweeter takes the rest of the frequency band. As you'd expect, the design cues from the M6 are carried over to the tripole or a hybrid 3-way XTZ S5 surround speaker. The S5 has a similar multi-tweeter design featuring 2 1-inch tweeters, and both operate from 1.2 kHz up. These are paired with a 4-inch mid-woofer on the front face, and then on the non-parallel sides, they each feature a single 3-inch full-range woofer. They are, again, quite dense at 16.5 pounds and are 11 inches tall by 8 inches deep. If you're looking to hang these on a wall, you'll definitely want to consider the sturdy XTZ flush mount bracket. With 3 different wiring configurations, the S5 speakers prove to be a very versatile surround speaker. When it comes to surround, some people choose monopole or a direct firing speaker for surround use. These offer a very balanced frequency response, but can be easily localized, making all the surround effects sounding like they're coming from a single point on your wall. For folks looking for a more diffused sound, where surround effect seems to be coming from all sides and behind you, but you can't tell exactly where, they often choose a bipolar or dipole speaker. The S5 takes a swing at being the best of all worlds. With various configurations of wiring, the 4 binding posts use the included metal jumper bridge, and you can configure the speaker for one of 3 modes. In the direct mode, the front array is primary, with the sides producing low frequency only. In dipole mode, the sides are all running full range, out of phase, and the front woofer is also active, helping with the low frequencies. And in dipole times 3, all drivers are running full range, so you get a combination of a direct and a dipole speaker working in tandem. For the record, as I was using these, my favorite in my setup was the dipole 3 times, with just the right hint of diffused sound, but your taste might vary. And that brings us to how this system does sound. I started with some stereo listening using a pair of the M6s on 24-inch concrete stands. Once again, these speakers are designed to be crossed over with a subwoofer, so I mated them with my 2012 SVS PB12 NSD, and I crossed them over at 80 Hz. One track that I go back to often, as frequent viewers might note, is Feist's The Limit to Your Love. One of the things that I listen for in this song is a good sense of spaciousness, as the recording captures a lot of the room ambience. This requires the speakers to reproduce transients well, with quick transitions from loud to soft, and also to resolve the slightest sound of room reverb. The XTZ Cinema speakers handled this task fabulously, perhaps because of a benefit of the multiple tweeters, as Dan notes again. Another benefit to using 4 tweeters is the ability to control the dispersion characteristics. For instance, in the off-axis reproduction, the sound waves that will bounce off early reflection points on your walls or your floor are still, with the XTZs, a good representation of the on-axis response, but they'll be attenuated or a much lower level, causing less blurring of the image and masking of these subtle details. Also in The Limit to Your Love, there's a passage with a few powerful held high notes that will quickly reveal any harshness in the upper mid frequencies, or in the case of the XTZs, the tweeters. My current speakers exhibit just a little bit of this harshness, but the XTZ M6s didn't display any at all. For a 5.1 listening, I used a third M6 in a horizontal configuration below my screen as my center channel. The S5 surround speakers were placed on stands just behind the listening position, with the center of the tweeter array approximately 24 inches above ear level, and they are wired in that dipole 3 times configuration. One of the main design goals of the XTZ Cinema series is high output, so I grabbed a recent blockbuster, Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, and I cranked my system up to reference level. This was probably a mistake. The XTZs didn't shy away from the high levels one bit, and in the helicopter crash scene early on in the film, where other systems might have compressed short of the peak levels, the XTZ hit the top of that dynamic range, and I was quickly scrambling to turn the volume down. The XTZ Cinema series represents the willingness of a talented speaker designer to think outside the box. Their uncommon multi-tweeter approach certainly requires a more complex design, but it also yields a number of acoustic payoffs, such as better power handling for the broadest dynamic range, a more optimal crossover point between the woofers and the tweeters, and because each tweeter isn't working as hard due to the sharing of responsibility in that high-frequency reproduction, there will be less of a chance of tonal inaccuracies caused by heat. The M6 is solid from the first-class cabinet on the outside all the way down to the ground-up design of the long-throw drivers on the inside that produce low distortion and maximum output. At the back of the room, the S5 offers tremendous flexibility for a number of surround applications and listening preferences, and changing the characteristics of the S5 is as simple as moving a jumper. Of course, all this wouldn't mean anything if the Cinema series commanded boutique pricing. Instead, the direct-to-consumer model keeps the pricing at under $4,500 for the full 5-speaker system. We're very excited to see more options for consumers looking for high-end performance in a mid-range price, and I can't wait to see future products from XTZ, including the Cinema series subs, which look like they could be real monsters, and Audioholics will have their hands on one of those when they're ready. Until then, we certainly recommend that you take a closer look at the current XTZ Cinema series, as they offer dynamic performance in a modestly sized package.